In the vast darkness between stars, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a truth that every species learns too late. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never ever assume the prey cannot become the predator. The Zephyrian Empire thought they knew everything about power. They had conquered 17 star systems, enslaved 43 different species, and perfected the art of breaking spirits before breaking bodies. For 3 centuries, they had been the apex predators of their corner of the galaxy, feared and obeyed by all who encountered their crimson fleets. But they had never met humans. When they found Earth, they saw only another primitive world ripe for harvest. When they studied humanity, they saw only soft, emotional creatures obsessed with concepts like mercy and justice. When they began their invasion, they expected another swift victory to add to their collection of broken worlds. They were wrong. What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to become exactly what their enemies feared most. Throughout history, humans had been prey to larger, stronger, more vicious predators, and throughout history they had turned the tables, becoming the very thing that once hunted them. Now, as the last Zephyrian commander stood in the ruins of his flagship staring at the human woman who had systematically dismantled his empire, he finally understood the cosmic joke. In trying to make humanity their prey, they had awakened something far more dangerous than any predator the galaxy had ever known. They had awakened human ingenuity, human determination. Human fury. They had set free their final predator. And she was smiling. The first sign of trouble was the silence. Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Third Fleet had seen this pattern countless times before. The electromagnetic pulse weapons would hit first, crippling communications and primitive defense systems. Then came the fear broadcasts, psychic waves designed to paralyze the population with terror. Finally, the harvesting ships would descend like metal vultures to collect the broken remnants of another conquered species. But Earth was different. Earth was quiet. Standing 7 feet tall with crystalline bone spurs protruding from his elongated skull, Vexthara cut an imposing figure even by Zephyrian standards. His species had evolved on a world where only the most vicious survived, where weakness meant death and mercy was a luxury no one could afford. They had spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest, turning war into a science and fear into a weapon. "Status report," he growled, his voice carrying the subsonic rumbles that had driven lesser species to madness. "The pulse weapon struck successfully, sir," reported his communications officer, a younger Zephyrian whose scars were still fresh from the military academies. "All major population centers have been hit. Their primitive satellites are disabled and their internet networks are fragmenting. And the fear broadcasts?"
"Deployed as ordered, sir."
"Psychic dampening fields are active across all major continents." Vexthara nodded, his forearms working the holographic controls with practiced efficiency. The display showed Earth in tactical overview, a blue marble suspended in space, marked with red indicators where the Zephyrian forces had struck. It should have been over by now. The humans should have been cowering in their shelters, waiting for the inevitable. "Why are we not detecting mass panic signatures?" he asked, his tone sharpening. The communications officer's claws clicked nervously against his console. "Unknown, sir." "The psychic readings are unusual. Instead of terror, we're detecting elevated adrenaline levels, but they're coupled with increased neural activity. Their brains appear to be adapting to our fear broadcasts at an unprecedented rate." This was new. In 3 centuries of conquest, Vexthara had never encountered a species that could adapt to Zephyrian psychological warfare. Most civilizations simply collapsed when faced with the overwhelming terror that their broadcasts could induce. Some fought back physically, but their resistance was always brief and ultimately futile. "Perhaps their technology is more advanced than our scouts reported," suggested the tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Kylith. "Their defensive systems might have some kind of psychic shielding we haven't encountered before." "Impossible. Our scouts were thorough. These humans are barely out of their planetary infancy. They've only just begun to explore their own solar system. Their weapons are primitive chemical explosives and crude nuclear devices. They have no understanding of psychic manipulation or consciousness warfare. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The tactical displays showed no signs of the mass hysteria that should have followed their attack. Instead, they were detecting increased activity across the planet. Communications networks, while damaged, were being rapidly restored through alternate channels. Military installations that should have been paralyzed were showing signs of heightened activity. "Sir," called out the scanning officer, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from multiple locations on the planet's surface. It appears they're attempting to reverse engineer our technology from the disabled probe ships." "How quickly?" "The rate of analysis is concerning. They appear to be making progress that should take years in a matter of hours." Vexithara felt the first stirring of unease in his chest. The Zephyrians had conquered dozens of species, some more advanced than others, but none had shown this kind of adaptability. Most civilizations either crumbled immediately or mounted a desperate but doomed resistance. They didn't study their attackers' weapons and begin copying them within hours of first contact. "Show me," he commanded. The main display shifted to show a detailed view of what the humans called North America. Several locations were highlighted in amber, indicating unusual activity. The scanning systems focused on a facility hidden beneath a mountain in a place their databases labeled as Colorado. "The energy signatures are consistent with high-level technological analysis," reported the scanning officer, "but they're also detecting quantum resonance patterns we don't recognize. It's as if they're not just studying our technology, but improving upon it." "That's impossible," snarled Kyleth. "We've perfected these weapons over centuries of warfare. No primitive species could improve upon Zephyrian technology in mere hours." But even as she spoke, the scanners detected something that made every Zephyrian on the bridge freeze in shock. From the hidden facility, a pulse of energy emerged that was unmistakably based on their own electromagnetic warfare technology, but somehow different, stronger, more focused. The pulse struck one of their outer reconnaissance ships, and for a moment the vessel's systems flickered. Just for a moment, but it was enough. In 3 centuries of warfare, no enemy had ever successfully used Zephyrian technology against them. "How is this possible?" whispered the communications officer. Vexthara stared at the display, his mind racing. Every conquered species had followed predictable patterns. They would panic, then resist, then submit. But humans seemed to be skipping the first 2 steps entirely and moving directly to something that no Zephyrian had ever encountered: adaptation. "Commander," called the tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's coming from multiple locations simultaneously, and they're using our own communication protocols." "That's impossible. We never broadcasted our communication frequencies. They appear to have derived them from the analysis of our probe ships, sir." Vexthara felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: genuine uncertainty. "Put the transmission through." The display shifted again, showing the interior of what appeared to be some kind of command center. Humans moved back and forth with purpose, their faces showing not the terror the Zephyrians expected, but intense concentration. In the center of the room stood a human female, shorter than average for her species, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that held an intelligence that made Vexthara's skin crawl. "Greetings," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Earth's Defensive Response Initiative. I assume you can understand our language by now, given that you've been monitoring our communications for the past several months." The casual way she stated facts that their intelligence had assured them were secret made every Zephyrian on the bridge shift uncomfortably. They had indeed been monitoring human communications for months, studying their languages, their culture, their technology, but no previous species had ever detected their surveillance. "You've made several miscalculations," Dr. Vasquez continued, her tone conversational, almost friendly. "First, you assumed that because we haven't developed interstellar travel, we lack the capacity for advanced technological development. Second, you assumed that our emotional responses to fear would follow the same patterns as other species you've encountered. Third, and most importantly, you assumed that your initial strike would give you a significant enough advantage to prevent us from mounting an effective response. She paused, and for a moment her expression shifted to something that made Vexthara's blood freeze. It was a smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. It was the expression of a predator who had just realized she was stronger than her prey. All three assumptions were incorrect. Behind her, a massive display showed tactical information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. Fleet positions, weapon capabilities, even internal ship layouts of Zephyrian vessels. Information that could only have been obtained by successfully hacking into their most secure systems. "We've been preparing for this possibility for longer than you might think," Dr. Vasquez continued. "Not for you specifically, but for the statistical inevitability of contact with a hostile alien civilization. You see, humans have a rather unique approach to problem solving. We imagine the worst-case scenario, and then we prepare for it. We call it paranoia, but we found it quite useful for survival." The communications officer looked to Vexthara with barely concealed panic. "Sir, they're accessing our secondary communication networks. Somehow they've broken through our encryption. .com. Unknown, sir, the breach appears to be coming from multiple sources simultaneously, as if they've distributed their hacking efforts across their entire planet." Dr. Vasquez seemed to hear their conversation, despite the fact that they weren't transmitting it. "Oh, you're wondering about the network intrusion?" "Yes, that's one of our little advantages. While your species appears to have developed individual intelligence to impressive levels, you seem to lack the concept of collective problem-solving. When faced with a technological challenge, you assign it to your best individual minds. When we face a technological challenge, we assign it to our entire species." The display behind her shifted to show a map of Earth, with millions of points of light indicating active participants in what appeared to be a massive coordinated effort. Right now, approximately 4 billion humans are working on various aspects of analyzing, understanding, and countering your technology. That's 4 billion minds, each approaching the problem from a different angle, sharing information instantaneously through networks you don't fully understand. Our mathematicians are working on your navigation systems. Our engineers are reverse engineering your weapons. Our computer scientists are mapping your communication protocols. And our military strategists are planning responses to every tactical scenario we can imagine. She paused again, and this time her smile was genuinely warm, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "And you know what we've discovered? Your technology, while impressive, is not as advanced as you seem to think. You've simply never encountered a species capable of this kind of coordinated response. You've mistaken individual weakness for species-wide vulnerability." Vexthara found his voice at last. "You cannot possibly understand our technology well enough to mount an effective defense. We have conquered dozens of species far more advanced than yours. Have you?" Dr. Vasquez asked, her tone genuinely curious. "Or have you simply encountered species that approached warfare the same way you do? Individual combat, hierarchical command structures, linear thinking. Because I have to tell you, Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Third Fleet, registered commanding officer of the vessel Crimson Talon, born on the colony world of Kethbara approximately 147 of your years ago. We've been studying your approach to warfare for the past 6 hours, and we find it remarkably predictable. The fact that she knew his personal details, information that should have been impossible to obtain, sent a chill through the entire bridge crew." Vexthara realized that somehow, in the span of a few hours, the humans had not only adapted to their attack but had somehow gained access to information that should have been secured in the deepest levels of Zephyrian military databases. "How?" he asked, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. Dr. Vasquez's expression softened slightly, as if she were explaining something to a child. "Because you made the same mistake that every apex predator makes, Commander. You assumed that being the strongest meant being the smartest. You assumed that your way of thinking was the only way of thinking. You assumed that because you had always won, you would always win." Behind her, the display showed new information that made Vexthara's heart skip a beat. It was a real-time tactical analysis of his own fleet, showing weaknesses in their formations, vulnerabilities in their ship designs, and countermeasures for every weapon system they possessed. "Here's what's going to happen," Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice taking on a tone of absolute certainty. "You're going to retreat to what you consider a safe distance. You're going to contact your superiors and inform them that Earth is not the easy conquest. What choice? Whether to leave us alone or to discover exactly what 4 billion humans can accomplish when they're truly motivated to solve a problem." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Crimson Talon in absolute silence. For the first time in his career, Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Third Fleet found himself facing an enemy he didn't understand, using tactics he couldn't predict, with capabilities he couldn't comprehend. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, the Zephyrians had encountered prey that might be more dangerous than the Predator. The retreat was supposed to be tactical, a strategic withdrawal to reassess the situation and plan a more comprehensive assault. That's what Vexthara told himself as he ordered the Third Fleet to pull back to the outer edge of the solar system. That's what he told his officers when they questioned the decision. That's what he told High Command when he transmitted his initial report. But deep in his core, where the ancient instincts of his species still whispered warnings, Vexthara knew the truth. They weren't retreating to plan a better attack. They were retreating because, for the first time in Zephyrian history, they had encountered something that genuinely frightened them. The journey to the outer system should have taken 18 hours at maximum acceleration. Instead, it took nearly 30 as the fleet found their navigation systems experiencing mysterious malfunctions. Not major failures, but subtle errors that sent them slightly off course, forced them to recalculate routes, and generally slowed their progress to a crawl. "It's as if something is interfering with our quantum navigation matrices," reported the chief engineer, a massive Zephyrian whose cybernetic implants gleamed against his scarred hide. "But the interference is so subtle, so sophisticated, that our systems can't identify it as hostile action." "Could it be natural phenomenon?" asked Kyleth, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Negative. The patterns are too complex, too purposeful. Someone is deliberately sabotaging our navigation, but they're doing it so skillfully that our systems keep trying to compensate rather than raise alerts." Vexthara studied the engineering reports with growing unease. The humans had somehow managed to interfere with Zephyrian technology without triggering any of their defensive systems. It was like being attacked by a ghost, something that could touch you but couldn't be touched in return. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving another transmission from the planet. Multiple sources again. Block it." "I can't, sir. They're using our own communication systems against us. The signal is being routed through our internal networks." The main display activated without authorization, showing the same command center as before. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the center, but the room around her had changed dramatically. What had been a relatively simple command center now resembled something from the most advanced Zephyrian facilities. Holographic displays showed real-time information about the Zephyrian fleet, and humans worked at stations that appeared to be built from modified Zephyrian technology. "Commander Vexthara," Dr. Vasquez said pleasantly, as if greeting an old friend. "I hope you don't mind the navigation difficulties. We thought it might be useful to have a longer conversation while you're traveling." "How are you interfering with our systems?" Vexthara demanded. "Interfering is such a harsh word. We prefer to think of it as collaborative optimization. You see, while you've been traveling, we've been busy, very busy." She gestured to the displays around her. "We've finished our analysis of your probe ships, reverse-engineered your basic technology, and made some improvements. Nothing too dramatic, just efficiency upgrades that your engineers somehow missed." The chief engineer leaned forward, his eyes widening as he studied the displays visible in the transmission. "Those modifications, they're theoretically sound, but they should take years of development to implement safely." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "That's the difference between individual genius and collective intelligence, Chief Engineer Zorthak. Yes, we know who you are too. Your thesis on quantum field manipulation was quite impressive, by the way, though we found several areas where your assumptions limited your conclusions." The fact that she knew details about Zorthak's academic work completed decades ago on a Zephyrian military academy sent another wave of unease through the bridge. Somehow, the humans had gained access not just to current military data, but to historical records that should have been impossible to obtain. "What do you want?" Vexthara asked. "Want?" Vasquez looked genuinely puzzled. "Commander, I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This is an education. We're teaching you something that your species apparently never learned: the difference between being strong and being smart." Behind her, the displays shifted to show a comprehensive analysis of Zephyrian military history, battle plans, conquest records, technological developments spanning centuries of warfare, information that should have required decades of intelligence gathering to compile. "We've studied your entire military doctrine," she continued. "It's remarkably consistent across all your campaigns: overwhelming force, psychological warfare, rapid conquest, minimal adaptation. You've been fighting the same war for 300 years, just against different opponents." "It has been effective," Kylith interjected coldly. "Against opponents who thought like you, yes, but you've never encountered anyone who approached warfare fundamentally differently. You think in terms of individual combat scaled up to fleet actions. We think in terms of systemic adaptation and collective response." Vasquez walked to one of the displays and gestured to a complex diagram that Vexthara recognized as a tactical analysis of his own fleet formations. "For example, your current defensive positioning follows standard Zephyrian protocol for a tactical withdrawal. Ship spacing optimized for mutual fire support, sensor arrays configured for maximum early warning coverage, command structure distributed to prevent decapitation strikes. It's exactly what your military academies would recommend for this situation." She touched the display and the diagram shifted to show potential attack vectors, weaknesses in the formation, and countermeasures for every defensive system the fleet possessed. "Unfortunately, it's also exactly what we expected you to do. Humans have been studying warfare for thousands of years, Commander. We've developed concepts your species apparently never considered: unpredictability, asymmetric response, adaptive tactics. While your formations are optimized for fighting other Zephyrian fleets, they're remarkably vulnerable to approaches you've never encountered." Vexthara felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. "You're planning to attack us?" "Attack?" Dr. Vasquez looked genuinely surprised. "Oh no, Commander. If we wanted to attack you, you'd already be dead." The casual way she said it, without boasting or threat, made it somehow more terrifying than any war cry or challenge. "What we're doing is giving you a choice," she continued. "You can return to your empire and report that Earth is not a suitable target for conquest. You can recommend that they leave us alone and find some other species to terrorize. Or you can continue with your original mission and discover exactly what happens when you threaten 4 billion humans who have decided you represent a problem that needs solving." "You cannot threaten the Zephyrian Empire," Vexthara snarled. "We control 17 star systems. We command fleets that could reduce your planet to slag." Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, you probably could, eventually. But first, let me show you what we've accomplished in the past 30 hours. The display behind her expanded to show a view of Earth from orbit, but it wasn't the same planet the Zephyrians had attacked the day before. Massive orbital platforms were under construction, their designs clearly based on Zephyrian technology but modified in ways that hurt to look at. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and fold in impossible directions. Energy signatures that registered readings off every known scale. "We've built 16 orbital defense platforms using your own technology as a starting point," Dr. Vasquez explained. "But we've made some modifications. Tell the people who are doing too well's working. You see, your species appears to have a very linear approach to engineering. You build weapons that do one thing very well. We prefer multifunctional systems." She gestured, and the view zoomed in on one of the platforms. What appeared to be a single, massive structure was actually a complex array of interconnected systems, each serving multiple functions simultaneously. Each platform serves as a weapons array, a manufacturing facility, a research station, and a communication hub. They're also equipped with the improved navigation technology we developed while you've been traveling. technology that allows for very precise positioning anywhere in this solar system. The implication hit Vexthara like a physical blow. You've weaponized quantum navigation, among other things, she confirmed. We've also solved several problems with your energy projection systems. Your weapons are impressively powerful, but they're remarkably inefficient. We've improved the power-to-effect ratio by approximately 300%. Zorthak leaned forward, his engineering instincts overriding his fear. That's impossible. Those systems are already optimized to theoretical limits. Theoretical limits based on your assumptions about energy manipulation, Dr. Vasquez corrected. But you've been thinking about energy as something to be controlled. We prefer to think of it as something to be convinced. Much more efficient approach. That doesn't make sense, the chief engineer protested. Dr. Vasquez smiled again, and this time there was something almost predatory about it. Chief Engineer Zorthak, with respect, your species has been at war for so long that you've forgotten how to think about anything except combat. When you encounter a new technology, you immediately ask, how can this be used as a weapon? When we encounter new technology, we ask, how can this be used to solve problems? Weapons are just one category of problem. Behind her, new displays activated showing technological developments across dozens of different fields. Medical advances, environmental restoration systems, manufacturing techniques, computational methods. An entire civilization's worth of innovation compressed into a single day. While you've been developing better ways to destroy things, she continued, we've been developing better ways to build things, more efficient, more sustainable, more adaptable. It turns out that when you optimize for creation rather than destruction, you accidentally discover much more effective ways to destroy things too. The displays shifted again, showing weapon systems that made Zorthak audibly gasp. Devices that could apparently manipulate matter at the quantum level, reshape energy itself, even alter the fundamental forces that held atoms together. Of course, we have no intention of using these weapons, Vasquez said casually. They're simply proof of concept, a demonstration that your technological superiority isn't quite as superior as you assumed. What is it you want us to do? Vexthara asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want you to go home, she replied simply. We want you to tell your empire that Earth is not worth the cost of conquest. We want you to find some other way to expand your civilization that doesn't involve enslaving other species. And if we refuse? Dr. Summers, Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her expression shifting to something thoughtful and sad. Commander, in the past 36 hours, we've accomplished technological advances that should have taken decades. We've built orbital platforms that surpass anything in your fleet. We've solved problems that your best engineers consider impossible. And we've done all of this while operating under the assumption that we need to avoid harming you. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that made every Zephyrian on the bridge shift uncomfortably. If you force us to abandon that assumption, if you make us decide that the only way to protect our species is to eliminate yours, then you will discover what 4 billion humans can accomplish when they stop trying to avoid violence and start trying to perfect it. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. After a long moment, Kylith spoke quietly. They're bluffing. They have to be. But even as she said it, her tone suggested she didn't believe it herself. None of them did. In the space of a day and a half, humanity had demonstrated technological capabilities that challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about primitive species. They had shown adaptation rates that defied scientific understanding. They had revealed levels of coordination and collective intelligence that no Zephyrian had ever imagined possible. Vexthara stared at the empty display, his mind racing. He had been trained for warfare against other warrior species. He had studied conquest of civilizations that thought like his own. He had prepared for battles against enemies who would fight like Zephyrians. He had never prepared for war against a species that could become anything they needed to become in order to survive. And for the first time in his military career, Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Third Fleet began to seriously consider the possibility that his species might have finally encountered something more dangerous than themselves. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened in the deepest chambers of Kethel Prime, beneath layers of armored stone and psychic shielding that had protected the Empire's leadership for 3 centuries. 12 of the most powerful beings in known space gathered around the Obsidian Council table, their combined presence so intimidating that lesser species had been known to die of terror simply from being in the same room. Overlord Takmor, Supreme Commander of the Zephyrian Empire, stood nearly 8 feet tall and bore the scars of 100 battles across his crystalline hide. His forearms moved with predatory grace as he activated the holographic display, showing Vexthara's report in excruciating detail. "Explain to me," Takmor said, his voice carrying harmonics that could shatter glass, "how a single primitive world has managed to not only resist our initial assault, but to reverse engineer our technology and build orbital platforms in less than 2 standard days." War leader Siltara, veteran of 7 successful campaigns, was the first to speak. "The initial report must be flawed. No species could adapt so quickly. It's physically impossible." "The quantum signatures don't lie," countered Tech Sovereign Mordith, whose species had been conquered 2 centuries ago, but had proven useful enough to earn positions in the Empire's technological hierarchy. "I've analyzed every piece of data in Commander Vexthara's transmission. The energy patterns are consistent with our technology, but they've been modified in ways that our best engineers consider theoretically impossible."
"Perhaps," suggested War Leader Kavesh, "we're dealing with a species that has been hiding their true capabilities."
"A trap designed to lure in conquest fleets." Overlord Thakmor studied the holographic displays with growing frustration. The images showed human orbital platforms that incorporated Zephyrian technology but improved upon it in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. Weapons that could apparently manipulate matter at the quantum level, defenses that seemed to operate outside conventional understanding of energy manipulation. "Show me the communications again," he commanded. The hologram shifted to replay Dr. Elena Vasquez's conversation with Vexthara. The assembled commanders watched in silence as the human woman casually demonstrated knowledge of their most classified military information and technological capabilities that surpassed their own. "This human," Thakmor mused, "speaks as if she understands our nature better than we understand hers." "She's obviously studied our conquest patterns," said Siltara dismissively. "Any species with adequate intelligence gathering could compile similar information, could they?" asked Mordith quietly. "Could any species you've encountered access our deepest military databases, reverse engineer our most advanced technology, and build improvements to our designs in less than 48 hours? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Each of the assembled commanders had participated in dozens of conquests, and each was forced to admit that no previous enemy had demonstrated anything approaching this level of capability. "There's something else," Takmor continued, manipulating the display to show the tactical analysis that Dr. Vasquez had demonstrated. "Look at how they've evaluated our fleet positions. This isn't just intelligence gathering. This is predictive modeling of a sophistication level we've never encountered." The display showed not just current fleet positions, but projected movements, probable tactical responses, and countermeasures for every scenario the Zephyrians might employ. It was as if the humans had somehow managed to think like Zephyrians better than Zephyrians could think like themselves. "They claim to have 4 billion minds working on the problem simultaneously," noted Tech Sovereign Mordith. "If that's true, if they can actually coordinate that level of collective intelligence, then they represent a fundamentally different type of civilization than anything we've previously encountered." War leader Siltara slammed one massive fist onto the table, causing the entire chamber to vibrate. "It doesn't matter how clever they think they are. We have fleets capable of reducing their entire world to molten slag. We have weapons that can tear apart planetary crusts. We have conquered species far more advanced than these humans claim to be." "Have we?" asked Overlord Takmor quietly. The question stopped all conversation in the chamber. Takmor activated another display showing the complete record of Zephyrian conquests over the past 3 centuries. "Look at the pattern," he commanded. "Every species we've conquered has followed the same progression. Initial shock and fear, followed by desperate but disorganized resistance, followed by inevitable submission. We've become very good at conquering a specific type of civilization, those that think like us. He gestured and the display shifted to show detailed analysis of human responses to their initial attack. These humans skipped the fear stage entirely. They moved directly from first contact to adaptation and improvement. They've demonstrated technological development rates that exceed anything in our historical records, and they've done all of this while apparently holding back their full capabilities. You're suggesting they're more dangerous than they appear? Asked Kavesh. I'm suggesting they're not what they appear at all, Takmor replied. We've been treating them as a primitive species that needs to be conquered. But what if there's something else entirely? What if they're a species that becomes whatever they need to become in order to survive? The idea sent a chill through the chamber. Every Zephyrian was familiar with the concept of adaptive evolution, but it was usually a process that took millions of years. The idea of a species that could adapt in real time, that could become a technological equal in a matter of days, challenged every assumption about how civilizations developed.
What do you recommend? Asked War Leader Siltara, her tone subdued.
I recommend we consider the possibility that we may have encountered the first species in our history that is actually dangerous to us, Takmor said grimly. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency displays activated automatically, showing massive energy signatures appearing throughout Zephyrian space. Not attacks, but something far more unsettling: surveillance. Tech Sovereign Mordeth worked frantically at his console, his multiple arms manipulating controls with desperate efficiency. We're detecting scanning beams of unknown design throughout our territory. Every major world, every fleet position, every installation is being monitored simultaneously. How is that possible? Demanded Siltara. The humans don't have interstellar travel capability. They don't need it, Mordeth replied, his voice tight with fear. These scanning beams are operating through quantum entanglement networks. They're not traveling through space, they're accessing our locations directly through dimensional manipulation. The implications were staggering. If the humans could monitor Zephyrian space in real time, then they could potentially strike anywhere at any time without the limitations of conventional space travel. Are we under attack? Asked Kavesh. No, Mordeth replied, studying his instruments. This appears to be pure information gathering. They're mapping our entire civilization. As if summoned by their conversation, every display in the chamber activated simultaneously, showing the familiar image of Dr. Elena Vasquez. But this time, she wasn't in her command center. She was standing in what appeared to be a vast space facility, surrounded by structures that defied easy description. Greetings, Overlord Takmor, and esteemed members of the High Command, she said pleasantly. I hope you don't mind the scanning. We thought it would be useful to have a complete picture of your civilization before we continue our conversation. The casual way she addressed them, using their correct titles and apparently knowing exactly who was present in their most secure facility, sent shockwaves through the assembled commanders. How did you penetrate our security systems? Takmor demanded. We didn't, Dr. Vasquez replied. We simply built better ones. It turns out that when you approach information security as a problem to be solved rather than a barrier to be defended, you discover much more effective methods of data access. Behind her, display showed real-time information about Zephyrian military positions, resource allocation, even internal communications between fleet commanders, information that should have been absolutely impossible for any external force to obtain. We've completed our analysis of your civilization, she continued conversationally. It's quite fascinating, actually. You've built an empire based on the concept of apex predation, but you've never encountered another apex predator. You've optimized your entire society for dominating weaker species, but you've never developed defenses against something that might be stronger than you. She gestured, and new displays appeared showing comprehensive analysis of Zephyrian society, technology, and military doctrine. Your technology is impressive but inflexible. Your tactics are effective but predictable. Your society is powerful but brittle. You've created a civilization that's perfectly adapted to conquering others but poorly equipped to defend against conquest yourselves. War leader Siltara rose to her full height, her scarred hide bristling with rage. You dare threaten the Zephyrian Empire? Dr. Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. For just a moment, the pleasant facade slipped, and the assembled commanders caught a glimpse of something that made their blood freeze. It was the look of a predator evaluating prey, but it was somehow worse than that. It was the look of a problem solver deciding whether violence was the most efficient solution. War leader Siltara, she said quietly, I'm not threatening your empire. I'm explaining your options. You can withdraw from Earth and find other ways to expand your civilization. Or you can continue with your conquest attempt and discover what happens when a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history as prey decides to become the predator. When you had to give any romantic, but when she continued, her voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire chamber. You've been asking the wrong questions about humanity. You've been trying to understand how we adapted so quickly, how we reverse-engineered your technology, how we've managed to monitor your civilization. But those are the wrong questions. What's the right question? Overlord Takmor asked. Despite himself, Dr. Graben Vasquez smiled, and this time there was nothing human about the expression. It was the smile of something that had evolved beyond the need for mercy. The right question is, what else have we become while you've been watching? Behind her, the displays shifted one final time, showing images that made every Zephyrian commander step back in shock. Vast construction projects spanning multiple star systems. Fleets of ships built using technology that seemed to operate outside known physics. Orbital installations around dozens of worlds that shouldn't have been accessible to human technology. We've been busy, Dr. Vasquez said simply. While you've been deciding what to do about Earth, we've been deciding what to do about you. And unlike your species, we don't limit ourselves to one project at a time. The transmission ended, leaving the High Command chamber in absolute silence. After a long moment, Tech Sovereign Mordeth spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. How many of those installations are real? Does it matter? Overlord Takmor replied grimly. If even half of what she showed us is genuine, then we're facing a species that has somehow achieved in days what should take centuries. War leader Kavaish studied the tactical displays with growing dread. If they can build at that rate, if they can expand that quickly, then time is working against us. Every day we delay, they become stronger. Or, suggested Mordeth quietly, every day we delay, we give them more time to decide whether we're worth keeping alive. The possibility hung in the air like a death sentence. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrian High Command was forced to consider the unthinkable, that they might have encountered a species more dangerous than themselves. And for the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, they were forced to ask themselves a question that no Zephyrian had ever needed to consider. What do predators do when they discover they've become prey? The decision came at dawn on the 3rd day, delivered through channels so secure that only 5 beings in the Empire even knew they existed. Overlord Takmor's message to Commander Vexthara was brief and carried the weight of 3 centuries of Zephyrian dominance. Proceed with full assault. No survivors. Vexthara received the transmission in the privacy of his command chamber aboard the Crimson Talon, surrounded by the battle honors and conquest trophies of a lifetime of warfare. The skull of a Vorthan war chief, killed in single combat. The crown of the last Kelthrani emperor, taken during the siege of their capital world, weapons from dozens of conquered species, each representing a civilization that had fallen before Zephyrian might. For the first time in his military career, the sight of these trophies brought him no comfort. Sir? The voice of his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Raltok, interrupted his brooding. The fleet is assembled and awaiting orders. Vexthara turned to face the younger officer, noting the eager anticipation in his scarred features. Raltok had distinguished himself in the conquest of the Theshan Confederacy, where his ruthlessness had impressed even veteran Zephyrian commanders. He was everything a Zephyrian warrior should be, brutal, efficient, utterly without mercy. He was also exactly the kind of rigid thinking that the humans seem to predict and counter with devastating effectiveness. "The High Command has ordered full assault," Vexthara said finally. "No quarter, no survivors, complete sterilization of the planet's surface." Raltak's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Finally, these humans have been allowed to play their games long enough. When do we begin? Immediately. Vexthara moved to the bridge, his officers falling into step behind him. "Signal the fleet. All ships assume battle formation. Target every population center, every orbital installation, every structure larger than a dwelling. We reduce this world to ash." The bridge of the Crimson Talon erupted in efficient activity as the crew prepared for what should have been just another conquest. Weapons systems powered up, targeting solutions locked in place, and psychic amplifiers prepared to broadcast terror across the human population. It should have been routine. It should have been easy. It should have been exactly like the dozens of other worlds they had reduced to radioactive rubble. Instead, it was the moment everything went wrong. "Sir," called the sensor operator, confusion evident in his voice, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the human orbital platforms, but the patterns don't match anything in our database." Vexthara moved to the tactical display, studying the sensor readings. The human platforms were indeed powering up, but their energy signatures were shifting and modulating in ways that made no sense according to Zephyrian understanding of physics. "Analysis? Unknown, sir." The energy patterns appear to be fluctuating between multiple dimensional frequencies. It's as if they're somehow existing in several realities simultaneously. Before Vexthara could respond, the familiar image of Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on every screen throughout the fleet. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives of dozens of different species, some recognizable from Zephyrian conquest records, others completely unknown. "Commander Vexthara," she said, her tone carrying the same conversational friendliness that had become so unsettling, "I'm sorry to interrupt your attack preparations, but we thought you should meet some friends of ours before you proceed." She gestured to the beings behind her, and the display zoomed in on faces that made every Zephyrian on the bridge freeze in shock. Former slaves from conquered worlds, their expressions no longer showing the broken submission that Zephyrian conquest required, but something far more dangerous: hope. "This is Ambassador Kelthrani Torvel, representing the restored Kelthrani Republic. Ambassador Vorthon Sekmar of the Vorthon Liberation Front. Ambassador Thessian Prime Speaker Valandra of the Reformed Confederacy. And approximately 400 other representatives of civilizations that you believed you had completely conquered." The implications hit Vexthara like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just been building defenses for Earth. They had somehow contacted and coordinated with every species the Zephyrians had ever conquered, rebuilding their civilizations and organizing them into some kind of alliance. "How?" he whispered. Dr. Vasquez smiled, but this time her expression held genuine warmth. "Did you really think you were the only species in the galaxy capable of interstellar communication? We've been in contact with your former victims since approximately 6 hours after your first attack on Earth. It turns out that when you spend centuries destroying civilizations, you leave behind a lot of very motivated survivors." Behind her, the display shifted to show a tactical map of known space. What should have been Zephyrian-controlled territory was now marked with hundreds of independent factions, all apparently coordinated and all showing technological signatures that far exceeded their pre-conquest capabilities. "We've been sharing our technological improvements," Dr. Vasquez continued conversationally. "The Keltrani were particularly interested in our defensive innovations. The Vorthans were fascinated by our weapons optimization. The Thessians have been remarkably creative with our manufacturing techniques." Sub-Commander Raltak stepped forward, his scarred features twisted with rage. "This is impossible. We maintain oversight fleets throughout our territory. Any significant resistance would have been detected and eliminated." "Would it?" asked a new voice. The display shifted to show a Kelthrani commander standing beside what appeared to be a completely rebuilt war fleet. "Tell me, Sub-Commander Raltak, when was the last time your oversight fleets actually investigated energy signatures that matched their expectations? The question was devastating in its implications. Zephyrian oversight strategy depended on monitoring for unexpected activities, but if the liberated species were using improved human technology that could mimic approved energy signatures, then the Empire's surveillance system would be completely blind to their activities. "This is impossible," Raltok repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Vasquez's expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. "Commander Vexthara, you're facing a choice that no Zephyrian has ever had to make before. You can proceed with your attack on Earth, in which case you'll discover exactly what 4 billion humans can accomplish when they stop holding back. Or you can retreat and report to your high command that the age of Zephyrian dominance is over." "You're bluffing," Vexthara said, though he no longer believed it himself. "You cannot have rebuilt entire civilizations in 3 days. Can't we?" The display shifted again, showing real-time images from across known space. Kelthrani shipyards working at impossible efficiency. Vorthan research facilities producing technology that defied understanding. Theshan manufacturing centers building devices that seemed to operate outside conventional physics. "We shared more than technology," Dr. Vasquez explained. "We shared methodology. The techniques that allow 4 billion humans to work on a single problem simultaneously can be adapted to any intelligent species. When you apply that kind of collective intelligence to reconstruction efforts, remarkable things become possible." Vexthara stared at the displays, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. In 3 days, the humans hadn't just defended themselves, they had somehow liberated and rebuilt dozens of conquered civilizations, sharing technology that allowed for development rates that should have been impossible. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "We want you to make a choice, Dr. Dueb," Vasquez replied. "Right now, you have the opportunity to be the first Zephyrian to make a decision based on wisdom rather than strength. You can retreat, report to your superiors that Earth is defended by a coalition of liberated civilizations, and recommend that the Empire reconsider its approach to expansion."
She paused, her expression becoming sad but determined.
"Or you can attack, and discover what happens when every species you've ever conquered decides to demonstrate their gratitude for liberation." As if summoned by her words, new energy signatures began appearing on sensors throughout the system. Ships of unknown design, emerging from what appeared to be dimensional rifts, taking positions around the Zephyrian fleet. "These are our friends," Dr. Vasquez said simply. "Representatives of 43 different liberated civilizations, all of whom have spent the last 3 days improving their technology and planning their response to Zephyrian aggression." Subcommander Raltok studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. "Sir, we're outnumbered approximately 20 to 1, and their technology appears to be significantly more advanced than our intelligence reports indicated." "Because their technology is significantly more advanced," Dr. Vasquez confirmed. "When you give a species that spent generations under oppression access to revolutionary manufacturing and research techniques, they tend to be remarkably motivated to improve their defensive capabilities. For 3 centuries, the Zephyrian Empire had maintained dominance through superior technology and overwhelming force. But the evidence before him suggested that in 3 days the humans had somehow given every conquered species the tools to surpass their former masters. "This is your final warning," Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the entire system. "Retreat now, and you live to report what you've learned. Attack Earth and discover what happens when 43 different species work together to solve the problem of Zephyrian aggression." On the tactical displays, energy signatures continued to build. Not the chaotic patterns of desperate resistance, but the organized, coordinated signatures of a unified fleet acting with perfect synchronization. "Sir," whispered the sensor operator, "their fleet formations are unlike anything in our database. They appear to be optimized for tactics we've never encountered." Vexthara stared at the displays, watching as everything he had believed about Zephyrian superiority crumbled before evidence he couldn't deny. The humans hadn't just defended their world. They had somehow organized, equipped, and coordinated a rebellion that spanned the entire known galaxy. In 3 days, they had accomplished what should have taken decades, and they were still holding back. "All ships," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of 3 centuries of conquest, "prepare to withdraw. Sir?" Rail Talk stepped forward in shock. The High Command ordered me to conquer a primitive world," Vexthara interrupted. "What I'm facing is not primitive. What I'm facing is something that the Empire has never encountered before." He turned to face his subordinate, his expression grim. "We're not retreating from a battle, Sub-Commander. We're retreating from a war that ended before we realized it had begun." As the Zephyrian fleet began its withdrawal, Dr. Vasquez appeared one final time on their displays. "Commander Vexthara," she said quietly, "thank you for making the wise choice. When you report to your superiors, please give them this message. Humanity is not interested in conquest or domination. We're interested in problem solving. The Zephyrian Empire represents a problem that we and our allies are now equipped to solve." Her expression softened slightly. "But we'd prefer to solve it peacefully. The choice is theirs." The transmission ended, leaving Vexthara alone with the knowledge that everything the Zephyrian Empire believed about its place in the galaxy had just changed forever. 6 months after the failed assault on Earth, Overlord Takmor stood alone in the ruins of what had once been the most powerful throne room in known space. The obsidian walls that had once displayed the might of 17 conquered star systems now showed only static, their holographic projectors dark and silent. The council chamber that had once housed the supreme commanders of the Zephyrian Empire was empty except for echoes and shadows. The Empire was dying, not from external assault, not from the massive fleet actions that Zephyrian doctrine had prepared for, but from something far more devastating: abandonment. One by one, the conquered species had simply left. They had taken their worlds, their resources, their labor, and their knowledge, and they had walked away. Without fanfare, without revenge, without even the courtesy of a formal declaration of independence. They had just stopped being conquered. The process had been methodical, almost gentle. Human-built ships would appear in orbit around Zephyrian-controlled worlds, offering transportation and relocation assistance to any species that wanted to leave. The ships came with no weapons, no threats, no demands. They simply offered choice. And across 17 star systems, billions of beings had chosen freedom. Takmor activated the last functioning communication array in the chamber, establishing contact with the scattered remnants of his fleet. Commander Vexthara's face appeared on the display, looking older and more worn than should have been possible in mere months. "Status report," Takmor commanded, though his voice lacked its former authority. "The Keltharani system is empty," Vexthara reported. "Every settlement, every resource extraction facility, every orbital platform has been evacuated. The humans somehow managed to relocate the entire population of 14 worlds in a matter of weeks. Resistance? None. They left behind everything we built, everything we installed, every symbol of Zephyrian control. But they took everyone who wanted to leave, and apparently that was everyone." Takmor processed this information with growing bitterness. The humans could have destroyed the Zephyrian infrastructure, could have turned their liberation efforts into a campaign of revenge. Instead, they had simply made it irrelevant. What good were conquest platforms and control systems when there was no one left to control? What about the other commanders? War leader Siltara reports similar situations in the Vorthan territories. War leader Kavacius says the Theshian systems are completely depopulated. The pattern is consistent across all our former holdings. Vexthara paused, his expression troubled. "Sir, there's something else. We've been detecting massive construction projects in several uninhabited systems. The liberated species aren't just leaving our territory, they're building something new." "Shh, shh, 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 shh." The display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the edge of known space. Massive orbital installations, unlike anything in Zephyrian databases, were under construction around previously barren star systems. The designs incorporated elements from dozens of different species architectures but unified by an underlying technological framework that was unmistakably human. They're building a new civilization, Talkmore realized, not rebuilding the old ones, but creating something entirely different. It appears so, sir. Our xenology specialists estimate that the construction rates exceed anything in our historical records by several orders of magnitude. If their current pace continues, they'll have established a technological infrastructure that surpasses the Empire within a standard year. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just liberated the conquered species, they had given them the tools to build something better than what they had lost. Something that wouldn't just match Zephyrian capabilities but would render them obsolete. Sir, Vexthara continued reluctantly, we've also been receiving communications, not threats or demands, but invitations. Invitations? To participate in something they call the cooperative. It appears to be a voluntary alliance of species working together on large-scale projects, scientific research, exploration, cultural exchange. They've sent detailed information about their goals and methods, along with an offer for any Zephyrian who wishes to join them. Talkmore felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of life: complete confusion. They're inviting us to join them? After everything we've done? Yes, sir. Dr. Vasquez sent a personal message explaining that they view the Zephyrian Empire as a symptom of flawed social evolution, not an inherent character flaw in our species. She says they're confident that Zephyrians could contribute positively to a cooperative civilization structure. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Not only had the humans dismantled the Empire without firing a shot, they were now offering its former rulers the chance to participate in whatever they were building to replace it. How many have accepted? Talkmore asked, dreading the answer. Approximately 30% of our remaining population, Vexthara admitted, including several high-ranking officers and most of our scientific personnel. The humans have established integration facilities that help Zephyrians adapt to cooperative social structures. Adapt how? They've developed psychological techniques that help warrior species transition to collaborative thinking patterns. Apparently, the same collective intelligence methods they use to coordinate their defense can be adapted to help individual members of aggressive species learn new behavioral frameworks. Talkmore stared at the display in shocked silence. The humans were not just defeating the Empire, they were transforming it. They were taking everything that made Zephyrians dangerous and finding ways to redirect those capabilities toward constructive purposes. And it's working? According to the reports, yes. Zephyrians who complete the integration process report significantly higher levels of personal satisfaction and productivity. They describe feeling useful and valued in ways that military service never provided. The final blow to Talkmore's understanding came when Vexthara activated a secondary display showing a real-time communication from one of the integration facilities. The image showed a group of Zephyrians working alongside members of species they had previously conquered, all focused on what appeared to be a complex engineering project. The Zephyrians looked content. More than content, they looked genuinely happy in a way that Talkmore had never seen before. They're not being controlled or coerced, Vexthara explained. The integration process is entirely voluntary, and participants can leave at any time, but almost none do. They report that cooperative problem-solving provides the same intellectual stimulation as warfare, but with constructive rather than destructive outcomes. Before Talkmore could respond, every display in the chamber activated simultaneously, showing the familiar image of Dr. Elena Vasquez. But this time, she wasn't in a command center or research facility. She was standing in what appeared to be a garden surrounded by plants and flowers from dozens of different worlds. "Overlord Talkmore," she said gently, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I thought it was time we had a direct conversation." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice carrying none of its former authority. "I want to offer you the same choice we've offered every other Zephyrian," she replied. "The chance to be part of something larger than conquest." the chance to discover what your species could accomplish if you channeled your capabilities toward creation rather than destruction. You've destroyed everything we built. Dr. Vasquez shook her head sadly. No, Overlord, we've liberated everyone you enslaved. What you built was a system of oppression that could only exist as long as your victims had no alternatives. When we provided those alternatives, the system collapsed naturally. She gestured, and the display behind her showed images from across the galaxy. Former Zephyrian territories were blooming with new life as liberated species rebuilt their worlds. But more than that, they were collaborating, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that were creating unprecedented prosperity. The truth is, Dr. Vasquez continued, your empire was never as powerful as you believed. It was held together by fear and isolation. When we broke that isolation, when we connected your victims with each other and with new possibilities, your control vanished because it had never been real in the first place. What happens to those who refuse your offer? Nothing, she said simply. We don't force participation. If you prefer to maintain the old ways, you're welcome to do so within your remaining territory. But you should understand that the galaxy has moved beyond the need for predatory civilizations. There are better ways to live, better ways to grow, better ways to explore the universe. Tokmor studied her face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden threat. But he found only genuine compassion, which somehow made the offer even more devastating than any ultimatum could have been. You're asking me to abandon everything my species has ever been. I'm asking you to become everything your species could be, Dr. Vasquez corrected. Zephyrians are remarkably intelligent, highly motivated, and capable of incredible focus when working toward goals. Those are valuable traits in a cooperative civilization. The only thing that needs to change is the goals themselves. Behind her, the display shifted to show a massive project under construction at the edge of known space. It appeared to be some kind of exploration vessel, but on a scale that dwarfed anything the Empire had ever built. We're planning an expedition to another galaxy, she explained. A journey that will require the combined efforts of hundreds of different species, each contributing their unique capabilities to overcome challenges we can't even imagine yet. We could use Zephyrian strategic thinking, tactical planning, and organizational skills. She smiled, and for the first time her expression held no trace of the predatory calculation that had so unsettled him during their previous encounters. The universe is vast, Overlord Tokmor. There are wonders to explore, problems to solve, discoveries to make that dwarf anything your empire ever accomplished through conquest. The only question is whether you want to be part of finding them. The transmission ended, leaving Tokmor alone with a choice that no Zephyrian leader had ever faced. The choice between clinging to a dying empire built on dominance or embracing a future based on cooperation. For the first time in his life, the most powerful being in the Zephyrian Empire sat down and began to seriously consider the possibility that power might not be the most important thing in the universe. Outside the throne room windows, the stars shone with the same light they had carried for billions of years. But for the first time in Zephyrian history, they looked less like targets to be conquered and more like destinations to be explored. And in that shift of perspective, the empire that had lasted for 3 centuries died not with violence or revenge, but with the quiet recognition that there had always been a better way to live among the stars. The age of the predator was ending. The age of the explorer had begun. And at the center of it all, humanity had kept its promise. They had set free their final predator, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that the greatest strength was not in the ability to dominate others, but in the wisdom to help them become more than they had ever imagined possible. In the end, the humans had won not by becoming better predators, but by proving that the very concept of predation was an evolutionary dead end. They had shown that in a universe vast enough to contain infinite possibilities, the only true victory was learning to explore those possibilities together. And as Overlord Tokmor sat in his empty throne room contemplating a future he had never imagined possible, he began to understand why Dr. Elena Vasquez had smiled when she offered him the chance to become part of something greater than empire. She had been offering him the chance to become human.